Hey, everybody, Dr. Grant here. And today we are going to be talking about specifically why your low motivation isn't just a dopamine problem. Now, the reason I say this is because anytime that someone is coming in to see me and have issues with their motivation, everyone just assumes it's dopamine. But I'll tell you that that's like less than probably about 50% of the issue. And there's this whole slew of other things that can cause the low motivation. And so that's what I'm going to discuss today. So what I want you to first look at is this right here, is the different neurotransmitter pathways to help you understand that there is so many things more than dopamine. I mean, look at this. You got things like L-DOPA, tyrosine, phenylethylamine, serotonin, GABA, glutamine, 5-HTP, tryptophan. I mean, list goes on and on and on, right? Because I'll tell you, each one of these things can contribute to your lack of motivation. It isn't just dopamine, but dopamine's a big part of it. But we need to look at the body as a whole and understand that there's multiple factors that can contribute to the motivation situation. So I just want to kind of set that precedence and help you understand where I'm coming from when it comes to treating someone with lack of motivation. So when we are looking for evidence for that, we are going to do lab testing just like this patient and look at different specific neurotransmitters. Now you can see here this person was low in a lot of different things. I don't see this too often, probably maybe about 20% of the time where I'll see someone is low in every single kind of category. But you could see it's not just low dopamine that they're low in. There is other things I just showed you from those different neurotransmitter pathways. So when we're looking at this individual needs his serotonin addressed, his dopamine addressed, phenylethylamine, his GABA addressed, those different neurotransmitter pathways. And they all do contribute to his lack of motivation, focus, and drive. And it's so vital to test this to see if this is the case, if you need to be addressing each one of these different pathways. Now, the opposite can happen is sometimes when we do test, we will see where dopamine and other areas such as like serotonin and GABA are elevated. And so we definitely aren't going to treat it the same way, but these things can also contribute to the lack of motivation because when these levels are too high, you feel a little bit more agitated and irritated. And so you're not going to have any kind of drive or motivation for that matter when these levels are too high. You want a nice, good balance of what's going on there. Okay. So again, these are things that going back to this pathway is it can either any of these can be low or high in any of these pathways. So just to make that clear is we want to be looking at both of how that can be contributing to your low motivation, right? So this is way more than just looking at just dopamine. Now, some other things that are also key factors is I want you guys to also look at in this pathway are these things right here that I'm highlighting. These are what we call as cofactors. And cofactors, think about them as like ingredients. Like if you were to bake a cake, you need specific ingredients to make certain things. And so these things require to make things like dopamine, serotonin, GABA, right? You need all the ingredients. And what happens when you are low on ingredients? Can't bake the cake. Well, you can't make serotonin, dopamine, GABA, phenylethylamine, things that are really important when it comes to motivation and drive. So that's why we want to look and we test for different micronutrients that can be low. Just like this patient right here, they were low in specific B vitamins like vitamin B3, which is very important for helping making these different neurotransmitters to help with motivation. Vitamin B5, in some cases, even if vitamin B6 were a little bit on the low end, vitamin B6 is a huge one that can be deficient. Vitamin D3 is another big one that is like part of the ingredients that makes these different neurotransmitters, even especially dopamine. And there's different other things like different minerals or even metabolites like choline. Choline's a really important one for motivation, but also for memory specifically. And if you're like above 40, typically we'll see this as an issue. We'll see choline levels deplete, and usually that's the reason why you might have memory issues as well as motivation and drive. But also amino acids is a huge one that we like to test for because amino acids are responsible for also for motivation, drive, memory, focus, just like this individual, asparagine and serine, which are very two important things that help with cognitive output. And so if those are low, that becomes an issue. And even look at antioxidants like CoQ10. CoQ10 is really responsible for helping producing energy. And when you don't have very much energy, it's hard to have motivation, right? So if you're burnout, let me know in the chat. If you are burnout and have a lack of drive motivation, let me know in the chat because it's just very common with people that get older and they aren't able to really function very well. And so CoQ10 could be one of those key components, and it's good to test for that and seeing that that could be the contributing factor to your low motivation. Some other ones also to kind of keep in mind is like, for example, like omega 3s, like, looking at EPA, DPA, DHEA, when those are low, these are things that are more also important antioxidants that are protecting the brain that can contribute to your cognitive output for having drive and focus. So if those are an issue, those are something to also be looking into. Now, another thing I really want to point out here, this whole thing is when the foods that we eat and we consume, help with this process. It helps make the dopamine. So there's certain key micronutrients and amino acids as you see. But the thing is, if this right here, your digestive system is not working optimally, it becomes a big issue for output. So output can be a big issue. Why I say that is because 90 to 95% of a lot of our neurotransmitters are made in the gut. That's a big number. And so if this is not functioning like it should, the output is not going to be so great. And so the digestive system, even if you have some gassing, bloating, let me know in the chat if you guys have some gassing, bloating, or IBS. It's very common, or maybe you're constipated, or maybe you have running stool. And when I consider constipated, if you're not having 2 to 3 bowel movements a day, your digestive system is not functioning like it should. Pretty much, if you're having 2 to 3 meals a day, that's how often you should be having bowel movements. And so, obviously, it's not working optimally if that's not the case. And so we have to address this and see why this is not functioning properly, why your body's not breaking down the foods properly. Because if it's not breaking down properly, then your body's not absorbing the nutrients and helping feeding the brain, right? Because the brain and the brain itself and the gut are very interconnected. And so we want to make sure those are functioning properly. Now, another thing to also keep in mind is when we are looking at different aspects of neurotransmitters, there's also hormones that also come into play here too as well. So even looking at cortisol plays a huge role when it comes to motivation. So you can see with like this patient, the cortisol levels are really low. And you guys probably have heard me talk about this quite a bit if you've been watching me for quite some time. But I can't emphasize this enough because 92% of the people we have tested over the years have low cortisol levels. So if you're watching this, there's a very high like chance that you probably have low cortisol. And so that has to be addressed because when you have low cortisol, it's very hard to have motivation and drive. It just is. You're just going to be in this constant burnt out state. And so it needs to be addressed. Now, the other opposite can happen is where cortisol levels are spiked. And when you're in this state too long, you do eventually reach burnout. When you're high stress, anxiety, eventually you reach burnout, and therefore motivation and drive are going to plummet. And it's going to make it very difficult to initiate tasks, finish projects, or even be able to function at work or at home. So these are things that also need to be addressed if that is the case. There's also looking at other hormones such as like progesterone, estradiol, testosterone, DHEA, just like this person, these two different individuals. When those are low, guess what? It's going to impact motivation, drive, energy. And so they do need to be addressed if that is the case. So I hope you guys understand like there is a theme here. When it comes to motivation, like if that's what we're wanting, motivation and drive, all of these components, the brain, the heart, the liver, the adrenals, the thyroid, the digestive system. We got to look at the body as a whole because they're all interconnected and need to be addressed. We can't just look at just at the brain. And that's where a lot of people get this wrong is they're just looking at the brain and just looking at dopamine, but you're missing so many other things that need to be addressed. And that's what I do. That's what I have to do with whenever someone's coming to see me is those are things that we can't be missing things. Otherwise, we're just dealing with an uphill battle. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if this was value to you. Let me know in the chat if this makes sense and hopefully this was valuable to you. So let me know in the chat. So, I mean, if you would like help with this, like to help me order these lab tests for you to identify the root causes to your low motivation, I'd love to help you out because all you got to do is book a focus diagnostic assessment with me. It's a 45-minute one-on-one with me. And this is where I take time to meet with you, to dive deep into your medical history, to creating a roadmap of what we need to implement and what kind of action plan to initiate to help you get unstuck and to be able to have finally focus, motivation, and drive and have that energy to function and just live life. Okay. So if you want that, more than happy to help you out. All you got to do is just click on the link in the description below and hope to see you guys in the inside. Thank you guys so much. And I'll see you guys in the next live stream. Thanks. Bye.